Living in a safe, secure environment is something that every human being needs. Home, after all, should be about sanctuary and nurture. But sometimes, no matter how good the area, that sanctuary can be taken away all too quickly. Our neighbors have that power, and in some cases, their behavior just isn't intrusive, it's outright terrifying. Here are 10 creepy stories of terrifying neighbors. Number 10 is hidden history. On the surface, a neighbor can seem harmless, but they may have a darker side behind closed doors. For one Redditor posting about their strange experience with a creepy neighbor, what they found in their neighbor's house was very bizarre. Their dad was helping the next door neighbor with something at their home because the neighbor and his wife were elderly and needed assistance. While in their home, that person's dad glanced into a spare room, and what he saw shocked him. The room was filled with Nazi memorabilia, swastikas, and all. It turned out the elderly wife's family had been Nazis, and the old couple were seemingly proud of this. While they didn't parade this in front of people, behind closed doors they celebrated the evil of that unforgivable regime. Number 9 is private viewing. Privacy can be a problem if you have inquisitive neighbors. That's why some feel the need to install high fences or plant trees around their property. But usually people are respectful of such things because they wouldn't like to have their privacy invaded in the same manner. In one instance, however, an account circulated online where a neighbor went to great lengths to enjoy watching his neighbors. Looking out from their bedroom window, a homeowner noticed something very worrying. In a neighbor's house, he could see a telescope sitting in a room. The telescope was pointing straight at the homeowner's bedroom window. If this wasn't unnerving enough, the homeowner began noticing that the neighbor only ever sat in that room at night with a dim nightlight on. Just enough light to see him moving around the telescope. Number 8 is what made that noise. Sometimes a neighbor attempts to intervene in the behavior of others out of the goodness of their heart. They're trying to do the right thing. And if you're on the receiving end of this and feel like you've done nothing wrong, it can absolutely feel like you're being unfairly treated. However, in one such instance, a homeowner received this exact kind of intervention and was utterly creeped out by it. One day he opened his front door and found a note attached to the outside. It was from his neighbor and read, "You need to feed your cats or I'm going to call animal control. I can hear them meowing." The homeowner was shocked, not by his neighbor's interference in his own business, but rather by the fact that he didn't own any cats. He still thinks about this and wonders what the neighbor really heard coming from his house. Number 7 is a casual confession. One online story of a creepy encounter with a neighbor involved a casual conversation. The neighbor appeared at the original poster's home to make a complaint. Apparently, a shared pipe was spewing out some sort of foam liquid. The neighbor was convinced that it was something to do with them. During the conversation, it became clear that the neighbor had quite a bit to drink due to the way that he was speaking. When the conversation calmed down and became more civil, the neighbor casually made a confession in a throwaway comment. He said that he had been driving around on a nearby road and ran over an old man, killing him. Whether the confession was true or just the ramblings of a drunk man, the poster has kept his distance from the neighbor ever since. Number 6 is a knock at the door. When a neighbor knocks at your door, you probably expect them to be asking to borrow something, or there to let you know that there's some neighborhood issue you should be aware of, but you don't expect them to be pleading for their life. That's what happened to one anonymous homeowner whose story was related by a friend online. One day, a knock came at her door, and she was puzzled to see a disheveled girl about 15 years old standing on her doorstep. Cautious, the homeowner of the house opened the door and asked politely what she wanted. The girl then confessed that she had been held captive in the next house, and the homeowner had kept her in his bathroom without ever letting her leave. The homeowner immediately called the police, and the neighbor was arrested. Number 5 is on campus. On a college campus with a communal area, there's even less protection from neighbors than usual. In one instance, a college student had their own living space with a communal area that they shared with 4 people. One of those people was a man named Hugh. Hugh had obvious problems. For starters, when the shared kitchen knives disappeared, they were found in Hugh's room. He had embedded them into the wall, but that was nothing compared to his most worrying behavior. After helping Hugh move some things from his previous place, the college student was terrified by Hugh's attempts at thanking him. Hugh picked the lock on the student's room door one night, stood at the front of his bed, and when the student woke, simply said, "Thank you for helping me," and left. After that, the student barricaded his door every night. Number 4 is Keen Gardener. Harry Bridges' aunt once told him an eerie story about a neighbor she lived next to during the 1970s and 80s. The neighbor seemed reasonable enough, and she was always tending to her garden, which was filled with roses. The flowers on display were always commented on, people no doubt wondering what her secret was. As it turns out, the neighbor did have a secret, and a pretty macabre one at that. She was a volunteer at a local blood bank. When she was there, the neighbor would take bags of expired blood, sit in her garden in front of her flower beds, and then pour the human blood over the soil. She seemed to take great delight from this. That made people even more uneasy about it. But her garden continued to bloom, and so did her neighbor's unease. Number 3 is possession. One creepy neighbor encounter took place after the neighbor had passed away. The woman was named Mona and used to stand at her window staring out at the world, motionless like a gargoyle. When she passed away, her son asked someone if they could watch the house while they had her funeral, as there had been a number of break-ins recently. That's when her neighbor, Paras, agreed to help out. While she waited in Mona's home, she fixed herself a snack and sat on a big old armchair in front of the television holding the remote. There was when the power cut and, frightened, Paras phoned her dad to come over. He was unsettled by what he saw because Paras was sitting in the chair Mona had died in, remote in hand, acting like her at the same time they were lowering Mona's body into her grave. Number 2 is The Watcher. A man named Peter shared his frightening experience with a neighbor online. He wrote in detail about how his neighbor seemed unstable. The man would walk around the outside of his house during the day, staring at it from different angles. He also spent an unusual amount of time staring at his garage and car. At 4 a.m. in the morning, the man would be outside in his yard, checking his car over and staring at the street. Sometimes he would rush out of his home wearing sunglasses and carrying an old brown suitcase, as if going on a trip only to reappear moments later. But most frightening of all to Pete was that the man would watch him through the gap in his front door whenever Pete would return home from a night out. The neighbor still lives there and each night continues to watch. And number 1 is The Hopeless Romantic. Lexi was asked out on a date by her neighbor, to which she agreed, but she ended the romance after realizing that he seemed strange. 2 weeks later, the neighbor left a bottle of women's gummy vitamins on her doorstep. When she would walk from her house to her car, Lexi would receive a text from him watching her, telling her that she was beautiful. After that, he left flowers and a handwritten creepy poem. Frightened, Lexi put a sign on her door telling the neighbor that if he approached the house, she would phone the police. Angered, the neighbor tried to force his way into Lexi's home. After a restraining order, he bought Lexi a ticket to go to a concert with him. Thankfully, the neighbor had to flee the state due to an unrelated crime. If he hadn't, Lexi had no idea what would have came next.